I'm Gabe Lullo, and welcome to the Do Hard Things podcast. We're talking to go-to-market leaders and entrepreneurs who have conquered the challenges, the hustle, and the grind. Get ready for real talk, real insights, and no fluff.
But the hardest thing in the world right now is not actually closing deals, it's actually getting somebody's attention.
If you don't have that hook in that first 5 to 10 seconds, guess what? They're going to scroll to the next one.
You need to go in and you need to make it sound like yourself. That's the biggest piece of the puzzle. And I promise you, we can all tell.
The people that are trolls and the people that are haters never done the thing that you're doing.
I love doing this podcast because I get a front row seat to some of the greatest minds in sales.
Gone are the days of saying stay in your lane. When you're an executive leader and you're an enterprise-wide leader, there are no lanes. You've got to be partners.
Curiosity is like when the type of questions you ask is sometimes the value that you bring.
I need you to tell me when you're ready to buy or what you're ready to do. And I think it's changed so much into like adding more value. And if you're not doing that, then you're definitely going to come off as desperate.
High pressure selling is like a dinosaur tactic at this point.
No parent is like, oh, you should be a salesperson when you grow up, right? Everyone's like a doctor, lawyer, whatever crap. It's never salespeople.
It's not your job to motivate people. It's your job to find motivated people.
It's not cockiness. It's not arrogance. It's confidence knowing I know this and I know that I can help you.
From where I started to where I am today is all because I learned how to sell.
And there's too many people who have only been doing this for 5 freaking minutes. Sit down, close your mouth, actually go out there and get yourself beat up, then come back and tell me if something is dead or not.
That is exactly why I started this podcast, because right there, that's the epitome of doing hard things.
Welcome back to the Do Hard Things podcast with Lexi and Gabe. Today's guest, Zack Schneider, is the founder of Agency 15, a brand and business strategist and a champion of culture-driven growth. With a background in launching and scaling purpose-led ventures, Zack helps organizations clarify their voice, align their culture, and build brands that resonate. His work blends strategy, storytelling, and smart operations to create meaningful, measurable impact. Zack, welcome to the show.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Do Hard Things podcast with Gabe and Lexi. We just heard Zack's bio. I'm so excited to have you here, Zack. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you inviting me on.
Absolutely. So, Zack, the audience is going to be really thrilled about this one because you actually began your journey, really your first agency at 19, right? And then you scaled it to exit by 26. And what sparked that passion to get into branding building and businesses at such an early age in life? Mostly people are going to school and then starting their businesses, or starting their business 2-3 decades after they worked a job for a long time. How did you get started so young, and what was your passion there?
Honestly, I was naive. It came from a place of just unknowingness. And when you have nothing, it's surprisingly easy to start, right? So I had nothing to lose. So the risk was relatively minimal.
That's awesome. And you've always focused on aligning brand and culture. When did you first realize that branding wasn't just about design or messaging, but about people and purpose at the core?
I think it was through my own team and culture building, where that really resonated with me. And it wasn't until the second company that it really hit home. That comes with maturity.
Awesome. So tell us more about 15, what you guys are doing right now for the marketplace, and why are companies coming to you right now in this landscape of AI and everything that's going on?
Yeah. When we reinvented the model here, we spent a lot of time on what service means to our clients. And in doing so, I really sat down at one point, probably 10 years in, and really thought about what does it mean to be the ultimate service company in terms of going above and beyond every way, collaborative problem solving, bringing fun to the workforce, making our clients win. And I wrote out 30 fundamentals that everyone keeps on a carabiner on their desk. And every day we just kind of go through another one and we make that our mantra. And we've been doing that for years now, to the point where it's just second nature, and it really replaced values with just expectations and action-based items that we can correct as managers on the fly.
So these carabiners, take me through a little bit more about what you mean and what you use it for. Is it all 30 different names on it, or how does that work?
Yeah, so each fundamental, like, so today's is practice blameless problem solving. Basically, apply your creativity and spirit and enthusiasm to developing solutions rather than just pointing fingers and dwelling on problems. Identify the lessons learned and use those lessons to improve upon processes so we don't make the same mistakes again, and get smarter with every mistake, learn from everyone's combined experience. And then everyone goes around and explains or presents an example of how they've embodied that through some sort of client interaction or throughout their day at some part of the company, just to kind of ingrain that in what we do every day.
Absolutely. So was there like a pivotal moment when you were just starting 15, and how, you were able to really decide, okay, this is where we want to double down on, or was that focus from its beginning and its core?
It came much later, honestly. I think when you're small, you can make a lot of mistakes and kind of sneak by, for sure. But when you get bigger, to have consistent communication across everyone, because your separation with individual employees becomes more distant, how to communicate that on a daily basis and ingrain that in your culture on what your expectations are as the leader and kind of visionary becomes way more important.
I love that. And you mentioned that that came later on, but during those early years of running your own agency, what did that teach you about the difference between managing a team and actually leading one?
Yeah, that's a really good differentiator. So I was very much a practitioner during the early days too. So kind of doing a lot of the jobs in the trenches with everyone. And that transition is hard for a lot of people to kind of let go of those aspects and build trust and replace yourself time and time again with people who are considerably better. And that is really the difference between, um, leading and so on. And then really just allowing that trust factor to be in place as you continue to grow.
You use one of our favorite words, hard, all right? So walk us through that, right? Entrepreneurship really demands, those tough calls. So what was one of those hardest leadership decisions early on that you had to make when you were transitioning? And what guided you through that?
Yeah, I mean, there are some pivotal points in every company's growth where you really have to reinvent yourself in terms of an 80/20. That's what people reference a lot, right? What's the 20% of everything you're doing really well that is the most important things, and what's the noise, the 80% that just needs to be radically eliminated and reinvented. Um, and during those transitions, there are always very hard decisions that need to be made, whether it is the people who've brought you to where you are on that journey, and are they the people that need to take you to the next phase of the journey. Those are always what I find the hardest decisions, because it's tied into emotion and personal relationships. And I relate it to a lot of mountain climbing type scenarios. There are certain people who can adjust to the altitude and continue to climb with you, and there are certain people who just can't get beyond that next level of altitude. If you know anything about, kind of mountaineering, it's very challenging. The air gets thin, and not everyone can go beyond a certain level. It's very much the same level in business. That doesn't mean that what they brought to you at that point wasn't valuable. It is that they're just not the people to lead for the next part of the journey. And making those tough calls and decisions is always very hard.
I think something that's also hard as marketers and building brands is when clients come to you and have a lot of questions about performance, KPIs. What metrics are you really looking at when you're proving that the branding's working?
Yeah, so we don't just look at branding, and clearly KPIs are set well in advance during the sales phase. So we really start to understand what it is that they're tracking and what's important for their business ventures very early on. And that allows us to then understand the business case so that we can relate what we're trying to achieve to what they're tracking in terms of their key performance indicators already. If those don't exist, then it's a much longer conversation in terms of what is it that we need to track. And then we build dashboards and reporting and insights around all of that, particularly if there's media. If there isn't media, then, it's a lot of qualitative, quantitative research in terms of awareness and perception within market.
Yeah, and right now in this day and age, I think there's a big need for confidence building and like a mindset shift, especially in this everyone wants your attention and technology is like changing the landscape in a big way. What have you shifted from that hustle and grind to more of like that health and growth for leaders stuck in really kind of like burnout mode, or where do you begin to kind of rewire that mindset and build that confidence?
Yeah, it becomes a quality over quantity scenario. I think because there is so much noise in the markets, and with the ability of certain tools with AI and everything that's coming, there's just more noise. But as creatives and as communicators, to take that moment and really think through the genuine tone of voice and do something that's radically different and creative and personal and genuine in its execution, like we as people still very much relate to that. Um, with our hearts, with our emotions, with our past experience. I think that's a really tough thing to fake. I think AI might get there someday, but right now it's not. So I think it allows you to really stand out from the noise.
And with agencies, you get to work with a wide variety of brands from early stage to legacy. What's one belief or strategy that you think consistently shows up, regardless of the stage a business is in?
Oh man, one thing that really shows up across all of them. I think it really comes down to leadership. On the other side, I think if you have really great clients, it allows for really great work. Um, and the alternative too. I think saying no is super important. Um, and when it's right, it's right. And that comes with maturity and understanding and mutual respect. Um, there is no consistency across any of our clients. And it's what we look for in terms of consistency with the clients that we choose to work with. I think that's the big differentiator. I think that's what really makes you great, the people you surround yourself with.
Yeah, I mean, us being in an industry of agency life as well, but also a very different agency, you got to juggle a lot, right? There's so many moving parts. You have the ability to say no to clients, right, which is exciting. It's just totally different. So, what are your thoughts about people getting excited about potentially starting their own agency, whatever that agency can do? What would some warnings and some pitfalls that they would have to, and landmines that they would have to navigate around if they wanted to get into this, uh, very, like I said, dramatic agency life of juggling so many things and wearing so many hats?
Yeah, I mean, for everyone, it's going to be a different point in their life that kind of spark that lights them up. That might be the very impetus of it. But I'd really beg the question: do you have the grit necessary to see it through? And that's where I see a lot of people struggle. Um, the mental capacity to push through the really long hours, the ability to handle so many different inputs and tasks across all the aspects of your life, not just the business one, because the business one is going to be so laborious and so intense. That's where a lot of people drop other aspects in their life too, the family side, the all the rest of it. And sometimes, are you willing to risk all of it for this effort? And I've seen it both ways. But it's challenging for sure. I think how hard it is, no one will know until there's empathy in having been in the situation.
Yeah, I saw a meme the other day. It's like everyone wants to be a millionaire until they have to do millionaire shit. You know what I mean? The grit, the hard, the consistency, it's difficult. So let's switch gears here a little bit and talk about culture, and not just internally your company, but for our clients, right?
Sure.
Because you're a strategist at heart. So, you can have strategy, but without culture, it really sticks. So how do you help your clients operationalize their values in ways that allow them to scale?
Yeah, I mean, we've been pretty lucky that a lot of our clients really understand what their values are out of the gate. And we really just help communicate that at scale.
Okay.
Um, Most have pretty impressive cultures. And because we're a third party kind of practitioner brought in, there's a culture that already exists, whether they acknowledge what that culture is or not. And they're radically different. And I've seen it in so many ways, from really intense, fear driven kind of top down type of model to companies just as big in the billions of dollars that are, where the owner walks around and knows everyone's name, including the janitor. So there is no model in terms of that works or doesn't work. I think what the consistency is making sure everyone is aligned with the culture. And I think that's the differentiator. So if you have a lot of people within your culture who are pushing against it, that's where things tend to fall apart. If everyone wants to be part of a very driven, you know, intensity workforce, then that's great. And they will succeed in that. And if you want a more family friendly, community based effort, then that will work too. But everyone still has to be on board with that also. I think where they tend to really fall apart is when there is a inconsistency across all of it, and they're staffing people with wants and wishes as opposed to who they really are.
And as an agency, you're often brought into many different types of cultures. When you're brought in, are you finding any difficulties around founders accepting or other people on the team accepting an external team joining?
Yeah, on occasion. Again, that comes from being selective. If they're not ready to accept an outside team, most likely will turn down that business. And there's a lot of due diligence that we do before we take a client on well in advance. Um, and that comes from, maturity and understanding how these things have gone in the past. But if we really look at how to win people over, which does happen in a lot of these scenarios, it tends to be best if you bring research into the mix, because the numbers won't lie and you can base it on fact. You can base it on the numbers. Then it's not based on one person's opinion. And it's much easier to have a very fruitful conversation when personal opinions are brought out of the equation.
Awesome. So let's switch gears here because you have adopted very similar habits as us when it comes to being intentional about sharing, your journey and insights publicly, right? And when it comes to content, like we talked earlier, everything's very noisy right now, especially with social media blending into B2B. Um, you know, B2C usually starts off with it first, but then B2B kind of slowly catches up. And now they're definitely adapting and adopting the content game. So what has inspired you to start creating content around leadership and brand building and what you do? And why is it so important for companies to do that?
I think it just radically positions you differently and builds a trust factor that wasn't there before. I think with consistency and FaceTime, it gives you um, personality building, right? And I think that can be done through mediums like this, like never before, where there's familiarity. And if you're doing it over and over, like anything, that consistency builds trust. So, and I've seen content done a lot of different ways. As long as it's genuine and it's consistent, it tends to work really well. That tends to be the two piece that really works really well. If it's not consistent, even if it's genuine, then it drops off. No one is chiming in. You can't build an audience and following. And if it's not genuine, well, people will see through it right away.
We're seeing this shift right now from content from a company perspective and then content from a leader perspective, right? If you look at like Gary Vaynerchuk and all these big names, their personal following is 10x what their company websites or company social media following is. But yet that's driving their company and they're driving their revenue. So when a company comes to you and doesn't adopt that thinking, how do you position your feedback to them? We're like, oh, I don't want to get on camera. I don't want to be in a podcast, or I don't want to be a talking head. Yet it's really where the magic is happening, even for these large corporations.
And not everyone is Gary. Let's just set a precedent there. I think his personality and his honesty and his genuine approach, the way that he curses, it just is him to the nth degree. And there's no bullshit around any of it. It just, you get him 24/7, and he's been successful, and he's just telling you his own experience. And I think that goes a really long way. And there's nothing more consistent than what he's out there doing every day. That will not work for everybody. It is not going to work for the individual who just starts sweating as soon as they're on camera and they can't feel comfortable in their own skins. In that case, there might be someone within your company who can represent your brand. There may be someone that you can find who's a great face to help you communicate that and be that and to have those conversations as the face of your brand. I think people often overlook that as a method in which to start to communicate your company's brand values. It doesn't always have to be the CEO.
Yeah, I love that. And we have a bunch of people at Alley Oop who we all post. Me and Gabe obviously post a lot. How do you decide what messages are worth putting out there and really blasting on social media versus the ones that is like, not as relevant?
Yeah, that's a great question. It has to be part of the overall strategy. It has to be part of where you want to go as a company. It has to be on tone. And it has to be ingrained with, a goal and a KPI in terms of where you're trying to go. So the message has to be, and again, back to consistency. It's not easy to craft that narrative, but it should be done very early on and then stayed, consistent throughout.
And I'd love to know, so when you have those team members posting, it's not necessarily in your control what they put. So how do you really set that tone to make sure they're on brand?
Yeah, that's a great concept. So that's part of the strategy out front. So we choose a tone of voice, the audience that they're talking to. So in our particular case, my team has a very fun approach to how they go about it. It's more playful, it's about going, it's a little goofy at times, and that very much comes across in the personality that they portray on social media. And that's thought about, again, during the strategy component. And then guidelines are very specific in terms of this is the type of content we create. This is the type of content we don't. This is how you talk to the audience. This is how you don't. And those guidelines are built into our brand in terms of audience and how each audience is spoken to.
It's awesome.
And then
Let's
it's
talk.
segmented by a social media channel.
Yeah. Let's talk personal for a second. Let's talk about Zack. You've grown businesses, you've led teams, raised family. What rhythm or practice keep you grounded right now in the middle of all of it?
Health and wellness. You got to have some sort of, I think it's great that your mind is strong, but your physical body should be strong too. And I think it's really important to take care of your body in the process of all of this. I think often people neglect that on the journey because they feel like I can shave time here and put it towards one thing or the other. And very often, if you're not right physically and mentally, then you really can't be your best genuine self for your family, for your employees, for your team. And I think that's really important.
I love that. Yeah, physical health is so important and something definitely agree with. What's one lesson on your personal journey that really has taught you that continues to help shape who you are today and how you lead and show up for your team?
Constant improvement. We can always be better. I can always be better. I think just never settle for where you are today. And as soon as you think you've achieved something great, just know that this too shall pass. And that when you're in the despair of it all, that too shall pass. And just keep plugging along, stick to the goal, head down, stay focused, stay consistent.
So speaking of that, right? Stay focused, stay consistent. What do you, and again, leading your teams as well, what do you do to help them have that carrot in front of them? Like, what's that motivator, and how do you bring it out of them too when times get tough, or we don't want to be consistent, or things are slipping? How do we get people back on track, maybe yourself included, to keep
Yeah.
motivated?
Planning, we had a very ambitious 10-year plan that was based on our big, hairy, audacious goal of achieving being the best local agency in every market that we're in. And we put together a very specific set of criteria of what that entails in terms of service, community involvement, revenues, and all the like, quality of work, return for our clients. And it has to also be loose enough to pivot and find opportunities along the journey. So you have your 10-year plan, and then you really need to look at it we looked at 2 to 3 year increments that really help achieve those major milestones that will get us to that 10-year goal at the very end of all of this.
Love that. Zach, thank you so much for your time today. It's been awesome. Who is the best person listening to this that should reach out to you, and where should they look to do so?
The best person reaching out is the one that feels that I can help them the most. And feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Email is fine too, through the company website. We have access to all of that.
Awesome, Zach. Thanks so much for joining us on the show. We're super excited to get this out to our audience. We appreciate all you do in this space. And thanks so much for coming on, man.
You got it. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. Have a great day.